the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. 8 million. They're not extinct. Not a lot of them follow their ancient traditions anymore, but some do. Then there's another calendar, another Mayan calendar. This calendar was celebrated every single day. Every morning, there was celebrations. Yeah. Question?
Yeah.
Microphone, please.
You just made a statement.
I don't think so. Oh, there it goes.
You just made a statement about 5,000 years.
Yes.
What are you basing that on? What kind of statement is that? What is that?
The 5,000 years?
Yeah.
It was from the pre-classic, and then the classic period, and then the civilization crashed, and then went on into the post-classic period. So it was the blending of the Olmec and the Maya. Then we have the Thun calendar. The Thun. This calendar doesn't get talked about very much. Hasn't yet been talked about very much by the archaeologists. They talked about, when you hear about the archaeologists talk about the Mayan calendar, they usually, or the Aztec calendar, they're actually talking about this Hob calendar. It's the one that they understood. This calendar was used for one purpose and one purpose only: taxes. It was the bookkeeping calendar of the Maya. They were an agrarian society, and when could they pay their taxes? When the crops came in. So this calendar was used by the city-states for administration purposes. These two calendars, this was celebrated every day by every person, and this calendar was known as the divine or prophetic calendar of the Maya. You heard about the Mayan prophecies and how phenomenally accurate they are and have been? This calendar, this Thun calendar, is where those prophecies were generated. It is a 360-day calendar. We'll be talking mostly about this calendar. I'm going to show you a graphic of how these two work together. This is the 260-day calendar. And here, see if I can do this. Not bad. This is the Zolkin, that's the Thun, and each day on this calendar was like a tooth on a gear, like that. And there's 260 of them. And then over here, there's 360 days on that calendar. As this calendar turns in this direction, like that, it, in turn, revolves this calendar in large cycles. This one just goes around and around and around, and this one goes around in 360-day increments. Every 52 revolutions of this calendar, these two teeth match back up. It was a very special time in the Mayan civilization. To show you how seriously they took all of this, every 52 Thun, they would have a celebration, a big celebration, wherein the night before, they would put out every fire and every spark in their whole entire civilization. Every bit of fire was extinguished and was relit at the temples the next morning. and then distributed by the priests to the people, and by runners to the villages. And they spread fire throughout their whole civilization once again. All debts were absolved, and they started all over. That's a big commitment, don't you think? Can you imagine purposefully blacking out all the electricity throughout our entire civilization? I mean all the batteries too. No embers. Completely turning off all the electricity because of an event on your calendar. Can you imagine that? Not our civilization. We're looking at something completely differently, aren't we?
When they put out every single fire, was it a 24-hour period that they went from? Like, how long a period was it that you said, like, from, was it dawn to dusk or what?
Yeah. It was put out at night and then started the next morning. All of them were, every fire was extinguished from like noon on. They put out all the fires, so that night there was no fire. Okay? By the way, an interesting point that I'll touch on it now. We may cover it a little bit more in depth later. The Maya divided each day into 13 hours, not 24 hours. 13 hours. And then they divided those 13 hours, notice 13 intentions. Then they divided the 13 hours into what we would call minutes. Then they divided those 13 minutes into what we would call seconds. And then they divided those 13 seconds by 13, and that by 13, and that by 13, and that by 13, and 13, and 13, and 13, to where every single moment was individually divided by 13. Infinitely. That was their understanding. So, this was very, very central to the Mayans' understanding. Note, there are no planets or moons or anything going around our sun every 260 days. There are no planets or moons or any objects going around every 360 days either. Although I guess it's a coincidence that every planet and every galaxy throughout the whole universe, all of them spin in 360 degrees. Our calendar only has to do with our speck of mud going around this little speck of light we call the sun in a sea of 100 billion stars in this one galaxy out of 100 billion galaxies in the universe. So how big is our calendar? Our calendar is completely insignificant. On the other hand, these guys were looking at something a lot bigger. Now, there's a fella by the name of Carl Johan Calleman. He's a Swedish microbiologist. For 30 years, he's worked in laboratories, looking through microscopes at smaller and smaller particles or parts of life. Okay, very exacting, meticulous work. Most of his work had to do with entomology, with pollution and its effects on the cell and how it causes diseases. That's most of his work. And he was inspired by a visit down to the Maya lands to start studying the Mayan calendar. He took it up as a hobby to begin with, but he started studying it with his clinical techniques to find out what he could prove about the calendar rather than what he thought or conjectured about the calendar, which is what's all been going on so far. All the archaeologists have their own idea, and they kind of match up with other people's ideas about what this was all about. Mr. Calleman took a different route. I myself am an artist, a sculptor. I'm not an archaeologist or didn't even go to school much. I'm an artist. And I was approaching the calendar from more of a heart space or intuitive space.